Greetings, fellow ghouls. So nice of you to stop by on this stormy evening. I know it's getting quite late, but with the weather out there only getting worse, I don't think you're going anywhere. So pull up a chair, and I'll read to you from my collection of scary stories. Now, this book I have here is a special one. Each twisted tale of terror within its pages is true. So grab a blanket and I'll find a good one for us. Ah, yes, this one will do nicely. It was the summer of 2008, or maybe 2009. I can't quite recall which one. I was on vacation with my family at a lake somewhere in Maine. My mom and dad, my aunt and uncle, my cousins. All in all, 8 of us were staying at this old cabin right next to the water. There weren't enough bedrooms for everyone to get one, so my cousins and I were sleeping on air mattresses out in the living room of the cabin. The living room had these big, sliding glass doors, which looked out onto the lake. It was just a quick walk down to the wooden dock, which extended out onto the lake, maybe 20 feet or so. The area was incredibly quiet. There were a few other scattered houses around the lake and in the woods nearby, but not many people around at all. The first few days of the vacation were everything you could want. My cousins and I would get up late, run down to the dock and jump in the water. Often we'd get in mud fights, where we threw the muck from the bottom of the lake at each other. We'd even build campfires to roast marshmallows for s'mores. Typical summertime stuff. It doesn't get much better than that. However, even with these fond memories, when I look back on the trip now, I can't help but get shivers down my spine. One day towards the end of our trip, I was playing catch with my cousin when I missed one of his throws and watched the baseball roll under our cabin's porch. I hadn't yet poked around under this porch, but it was our only ball, so I went to retrieve it. There was a ton of junk under there, but I found the ball pretty quickly. As I turned to go, I noticed something in the corner, hiding under a ripped blue tarp. It was a canoe. One of the paddles was broken and the hull was full of spiders, but it was a canoe nonetheless. My cousins gave me a hand and we dragged it from beneath the porch. Now, in the middle of the lake were these 2 small islands. Calling them islands is a bit generous, really. They were each just a clump of rocks with a few trees. After finding the canoe, though, we knew we had to go explore them. Our parents watched from the porch as we piled into the canoe and set off. The lake wasn't that large, so they weren't too concerned about us. We only had the one working paddle, though, so I sat in the front and used my hands in the water to help push us along. We reached the islands in no time, paddling around the rocks and peering through the trees. If you've been to a lake before, you know that sound travels differently over water. You feel like you can hear a bit better than normal. Birds chirping, fish jumping, people splashing. The sounds carry across the surface. As we drifted between the islands, I noticed how quiet everything was. A sense of unease came over me, one which I find difficult to explain. It was like that feeling you get in your stomach when watching someone do something dangerous, like something is about to go wrong. I told my cousins something felt wrong, and while they didn't feel as uneasy as me, we all agreed to paddle back to the cabin. That night I laid awake on my air mattress. that feeling still lingering as I looked out onto the lake, through the big sliding glass doors. With the moonlight glistening on the lake, I could make out the silhouette of the dock and the 2 islands beyond. I drifted in and out of sleep as I watched the water ripple. And then I saw it. Something moving in the water. A dark, irregular shape by the surface. Not splashing around exactly, but sort of bobbing rhythmically. I sat up, my eyes widening to see in the darkness. The shape was moving slowly in the water, out by the 2 islands, but coming closer. I whispered across the room to my cousins, but they didn't wake up. I couldn't take my eyes off of the shape as it floated, closer now, at the end of our dock. The feeling in my stomach intensified, almost painful now. The shape slowing as it reached the old wooden structure. Then, a hand. Yes, it was. A hand reached out and grabbed one of the boards. The shape bent and twisted, pulling itself from the lake and up onto the dock. The moonlit water dripping from its limbs. It was a woman. Deformed by the elements, but a woman nonetheless. She walked up the dock and towards our cabin, her silhouette moving strangely, almost like she wasn't doing it on purpose. I called out to my cousins again, and they still didn't wake up. Flop, flop, flop. She was getting close enough now that I could hear her soggy, swollen feet on the grass outside. I laid back down and pulled the covers over my head, closing my eyes as tightly as I could. Her footsteps grew louder as she reached the back porch, stopping at the sliding doors and slapping a wet, mucky palm on the glass pane. I covered my ears as she started to pound again and again and again. I woke up suddenly, my air mattress squeaking beneath me as I jostled upright. You know those dreams where, after waking up, it takes you a second to realize that you were dreaming? This was one of those. I turned my head slowly to the sliding glass doors. Nothing. Outside, the water of the lake was calm. The next morning, I woke up and heard people talking in the kitchen. I walked in and poured myself a bowl of cereal. Everyone was in there, with serious looks on their faces. I asked them what was going on, and they said that the police had been by the cabin that morning, asking if any of us had seen or heard anything strange the night before last. Apparently, at a house across the lake, there had been a woman staying by herself. She had just gotten out of an ugly divorce and was out here in the middle of nowhere to get away from her abusive ex-husband. But somehow, he had found her. He murdered her in cold blood and dragged her body out to the lake in a desperate attempt to cover up his unspeakable crime. My stomach dropped. The authorities had pulled her body from the water early that morning, and she had been killed the night before last, which meant that when my cousins and I had been canoeing out on the lake, her body had still been in there. I remembered that strange feeling I'd had while we paddled by the 2 islands. Maybe she had been watching us the whole time, her lifeless eyes fixed on us from the murky depths below. My dream. It all came back to me at once. My dream of the crooked woman rising from the black waters. Had my subconscious been trying to tell me something? Had I actually seen something in the water, and had my innocent young mind blocked the memory out, only to have it return in the nightmare that evening? To this day, I still wonder. My strange feeling, the nightmare, were they just a coincidence? Or could her restless spirit have been trying to reach out to me? Had I truly been visited by the Lady of the Lake? Well, that was a spooky one. I've always found bodies of water to be quite scary. And bodies in water, well, that's even scarier. It's still raining outside, but I do suggest you leave. At this hour, the spirits of Aberfoyle grow restless and, well, they're not all as friendly as I am. Until next time, fellow ghouls,